views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hi, and welcome to Open BXRX Tuesday on BronxNet, a weekly program providing you the latest information, resources, services, and community efforts taking place locally here in the Bronx and virtually. I'm your host, Kevin Aline, and today is Tuesday, December 7th, 2021. Coming up, Kyle Rittenhouse fatally shot and injured 3 men in Kenosha, Wisconsin during a protest. After a 2-week trial, Rittenhouse was found not guilty on all charges. Was this verdict fair by the law or simply unjust? Then a remarkable story about an Argentinian woman who may have been cured from HIV. How could this research from the case help with the fight against the HIV? After that, nearly 2 years after the death of Ahmaud Arbery, the 3 white men who chased and killed the 25-year-old were all found guilty of murder charges. Was Ahmaud's murder a result of implicit or explicit bias? And 'tis the season for holiday scams. A senior tax partner joins us to discuss the rise of scamming during the holiday season. Could shopping online at stores like Facebook Marketplace leave you empty-handed? So please stick around. Open BXRX Tuesday starts now. Welcome to Open BXRX Tuesday on BronxNet. I'm your host, Kevin Aline, and I'd like to invite you to get social with us at BronxNet TV on Instagram and Twitter, and BronxNet Community Television on Facebook. In August of 2020, a young man by the name of Kyle Rittenhouse fatally shot 2 men and injured another in Kenosha, Wisconsin during a protest against police brutality. After a 2-week trial, Rittenhouse was found not guilty on all charges after arguing the shootings were an act of self-defense. Joining us for a discussion on the verdict is Jody Morales, president and founder of the law office of Jody Morales. Jody, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So Rittenhouse was found not guilty. He killed 2 people and injured a 3rd. Can you just explain how does this happen?
Certainly. I mean, we're talking about self-defense law. Of course, self-defense laws vary from state to state, but in this particular jurisdiction, all he had to do was feel that he was in imminent danger of his life being taken from him. Now, of course, there's a number of factors that go into this and why so many people are looking at this decision like it doesn't make any sense, right? It seems like he came into it and created part of the issue. But there was a fair amount of evidence presented by the defense team that showed that he felt that he was in imminent fear. And that's why we got the decision that we got.
Thank you for that. So we've seen this before in 2013 following the murder of Trayvon Martin. George Zimmerman was found not guilty because he claimed it was self-defense. How is the argument of self-defense getting in the way of finding justice for victims in our courtrooms?
So I think self-defense is, something that we have to look at always from the perspective of the person who is feeling the fear or perceiving the fear, right? We can't say that self-defense laws, are terrible, are bad on their face. But of course, a lot has to be put into them as time evolves and as our other laws evolved to make sure that they're actually protecting people. Of course, if the tables are turned and you're in a position where you feel like your life is in threat of some sort of, really serious danger, you're going to want to have those laws, right? We can't dismiss them and we can't say that they're all bad. But it really is a factual analysis and a factual, kind of piecing together of things when that the jury has to do in order to determine whether self-defense was something that was reasonable under the circumstances or not reasonable. And I think that's where the question of justice comes in. In some situations, certain factors make that perceived threat reasonable, and in other situations, they just don't.
Now, how does this compare to the case of Abel Cedeno, a Bronx teen who was sentenced to 14 years in prison after fatally stabbing another student as a result from years of homophobic bullying? He also claimed that this was self-defense.
Mm-hmm. I remember this case very well. I practiced primarily in the Bronx, and I remember the case sort of unfolding before me as I was, in the courtroom handling other matters. And it was a very sad situation. Clearly, this was a young man who had endured years of bullying and mistreatment by others. But the case really did come down to a presentation of evidence, or rather, the defense's lack of presenting any evidence that the two victims in this case were actually the ones who were bullying him on the particular day in question. So going back to this, to the concept or to the law of self-defense, perhaps he perceived threats from other students, or at least that was the argument, right? There were perceived threats from other students, ongoing perceived threats for many years, but there just wasn't enough evidence presented to show that on that particular day, when he took action, that these other children were actually bullying him or threatening him. And so, it was a very tough verdict. I think that when you have someone who's been bullied for so long, sometimes that weighs on you, and you might perceive a threat where there isn't one. So mental health, psychiatric evaluations, all of those things really should have played into the decision here. But if we're looking strictly at the construction of self-defense, in this case, it just wasn't there.
So it's important to note that the cases that I just mentioned were all in different states. So it may vary, but when can you use the argument of self-defense in a courtroom?
Sure. I mean, if you think that your life is in danger, if you are perceiving a threat and it's a reasonable, perception under the facts and circumstances surrounding you, then self-defense is available to you. Obviously, nobody wants people to just sort of stand down and be attacked. But, the use of force is also something that comes into play. So, for example, if I, somebody my size and my gender is, trying to punch me, but I turn around and in self-defense shoot that person, that's not a reasonable response under those circumstances. It's different if that person comes at me with a knife and then I turn around and use a weapon to try to defend myself. Then it's a little bit more reasonable that I would use an item. But those are the types of things that really have to be analyzed in all of these cases of self-defense.
So people often blame the justice system, but this was actually decided by jurors who are just regular people. Do jurors often have complete and final say in cases similar to Kyle Rittenhouse's? And does the race and ethnicity of the jurors matter to you?
So I think one thing to understand first, before we talk about the jurors' power and their decision making, is that, in a courtroom, it's a two-person show. In the sense that the judge is making the rulings of law, and then the jury is making the decisions of fact. So this is a dance that happens in every trial in our country. The judge is just as much a part of, the overall outcome as the jurors, in the sense that the judge's rulings can potentially, not potentially, will definitely determine how the jury is receiving the evidence. And even in toward the end of the trial, when jurors ask for readback, which is not uncommon, certain things that the judge has done, certain rulings that the judge has made, will eliminate certain aspects or certain facts that the jury may have heard previously. So when they're making that decision at the very end, they may not hear the same things they heard as the trial was unfolding. So, to answer the question, the jury doesn't necessarily have the final say. The way that it really should work is that the judge is maintaining fairness, making sure that all of the legal rulings are designed to create an atmosphere of fairness, so that then the jury can make a sound decision based on the facts that were presented.
And do you feel like the race matters of the jurors? Because for this particular situation, it was mostly white.
I think race and gender definitely matters in terms of how a jury is going to receive information and decide on it. We all bring our unique experiences as human beings to a courtroom. And of course, if the jury pool is not aligned with some of the, participants in the trial in terms of their own experiences, certainly that's going to color the way the jury renders its final decision on the facts. I think there were a lot of issues in this case in terms of jury selection, which is, not uncommon. But I think, again, going back to maintaining fairness in the courtroom, it really does come down to the judge making the correct rulings so that the defendant can get a fair trial and so that, the other parties can feel like justice has been served in the courtroom.
Now, not only was he found not guilty, he actually lived to see his court date despite killing 2 people in public. Just so we're clear, do you think it's likely that a Black person or a Latino could take on the role of a violent vigilante and see no repercussions?
I think it's a fact-specific determination. Certainly, we can't ignore the fact that aspects of the justice system have been racist. People of color have suffered under many laws that were, to be frank, designed not with us in mind. But that's a hard thing to say. I think what matters here is the jurisdiction you're in. I think what matters is the law that is being decided, the facts of the case. Certainly, if this were a case in the Bronx, we might have a totally different outcome here. But it really is a number of factors, I think, that play into all of this.
And despite Rittenhouse and his victims all being white, how do you think race plays a part in this verdict?
I think, again, that race is always something that plays a part in a decision, in a legal case, because, again, we come to the courtroom not leaving our experiences and who we are at the door, right? I don't think necessarily that this case turns on race. I think it turned on the statute and the facts of the case. Of course, there was this underlying, issue, and that's what precipitated the protests and everything. But in this particular courtroom, I think what we really have to look at is the judge and the judge's decision making and how it seemed, at least from day one, that he was trying very hard to skew things in favor of the defendant. So yes, there's an underlying racial current here, but I think in the courtroom, it really was this desire by the judge to see to it that this young man was not, held to full responsibility.
Jody, thank you so much for joining us. I would just like you to tell everyone, this is a very complex issue. And as you mentioned, there's so many loops and turns that, of the law that you really need to study. Can you tell us where people can just learn more about that and even keep up with you?
Certainly. So I can be reached by email at jodymorales@gmail.com. You can also reach me via Instagram at jmoraleslaw. And I encourage everybody to do research online, to look at articles, to really go back to the statutes. There are many places online where you can actually read the statute, read the legislative intent of that statute, and then from there, read other cases that sort of interpret the law. I think it's important for people to do that. I don't think people delve into understanding the law in the way that they should. And I really encourage everyone and anyone to look for those opportunities and to also, look for trainings and seminars and, maybe take a class in legal studies. It's really something that everybody needs to be engaged in if we're going to make changes moving forward.
All right. Thank you so much. We'll be right back with more Open BXRX Tuesday.
We know that people are dealing with the health crisis, but there's also a lot of food insecurity.
We're giving out healthy food options, and that's what's key here.
If you're a senior, you have a disability, they'll actually deliver meals to you.
The residents are anxious, they're worried, they're scared, they want to be tested.
When things were happening in our community and we couldn't get the help.
There's almost a presumption
of criminality that attaches to your skin color.
The site will prioritize those who are at highest risk in the population.
If you feel symptoms and you'd like to visit one of these COVID-19 testing sites here in the Bronx, you may call the State Health Department's hotline.
Important to note about this site is no reservations are needed. This is a walk-in clinic.
A lot of us are out of work and looking for something to do.
We have the machinery and the skills to make large scales of these masks and gowns.
Take care of your people. It's going to go way further than we actually can understand.
Right now, employees like myself are just adjusting to the new reality.
Reporting from BronxNet,
we built a media network for you.
BronxNet TV.
Come learn in your new state-of-the-art studios at Lehman College.
At Mercy College.
And coming soon to the South Bronx in the Hub.
Inspire with your stories, culture, history.
Your Bronx on BronxNet.
Engage with us.
Connect with us at your channels and at BronxNet.tv.
Learn, engage, inspire. BronxNet TV.
From the Bronx
to the world.
BronxNet.
Welcome back. December marks HIV Awareness Month. Here to discuss the effects of the virus and a remarkable story about an Argentinian woman who may have been cured from HIV is Dr. Tim Henrich, Associate Professor of Medicine at UCSF. Doctor, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me on today.
So this is an incredible story. A woman known as the Esperanza patient, which means Spanish for hope, was diagnosed in 2013 with HIV. Today, scientists classify her as HIV-free. Can you tell us more about this study?
Absolutely. This is a very interesting and I think exciting case. This is a woman who was infected with HIV as early as March of 2013. And since that time, has actually not had any virus circulating in her blood or has had detectable virus replicating over time. In fact, she spent many years without taking antiretroviral therapy or therapy for HIV. And despite this, remained completely healthy without any indication of HIV disease infection and was otherwise normal and healthy.
So research has found that she was cured by her own immune system. Before we jump into that whole thing, can you just explain how HIV affects your body when you're diagnosed with this virus?
Sure. So HIV is, for most people who are infected, a lifetime infection. Once HIV establishes infection through whatever route or means that may be, it inserts its genome or its genetic material into our own host cells. So it actually becomes part of our or the person's genetic material once it infects. And it can hide in those cells even with years or decades of antiretroviral therapy. The virus stays part of the viral genome and the human gene as well in our chromosomes and our genes and our cells. And if for a vast majority of people, 99% of people that are infected, if they stop antiretroviral therapy, usually within days to weeks, virus will return and we will be able to detect replicating virus in the bloodstream. And that is a typical course of infection. Antiretroviral therapy is very good at reducing morbidity and mortality from disease. People can live very long, healthy lives for decades and decades on daily pills, and now there are now medications that people can take every several weeks instead of every day. But overall, despite the fact that people have treated HIV infection, they're still prone to increased risks of, for example, heart disease or other inflammatory conditions. So even with suppressive antiretroviral therapy, there are still some effects from long-term infection from the virus itself.
So I would really like to know, how is it possible to be cured from this virus using your own immune system when the virus weakens it? Because that's what news reports are saying, that it was her immune system that kind of cured her from this virus.
Yes, and that's what makes this so exciting, is that we've had a couple of cases of HIV cure in the past, one being Timothy Ray Brown, the late Timothy Ray Brown, or the Berlin patient, that had stem cell transplantation for cancer and became cured of HIV. But this is not something that we can give to a large majority of people. It's dangerous. It has a lot of side effects and toxicities. But what we've seen with the Esperanza patient, and also with a patient in San Francisco over the last several years as well from our own cohort, are these two women are able to essentially not just control the virus with their immune system, but they seem to have gotten to a point where they've controlled and eradicated a vast majority of virus that's hiding in those cells, or the reservoir for HIV, to the point where there is no detectable replication or virus in the blood that's circulating that scientists can find. And this is very exciting because it suggests that the immune system itself is able not just to control virus, but to essentially eradicate virus in any meaningful way from their bodies, which leads to long-term. I think what people are now hoping for in these two patients is HIV cure. But what this also tells us is that we can potentially harness that immune system in other people, either through vaccination or through other ways, and perhaps we can achieve cure by emulating what happened in these two patients.
So I really want to know, how were doctors able to determine whether or not HIV was present in the Esperanza patient? You may have touched on it a little bit, but I've read it wasn't a typical STD test that people usually get. So can you tell us what that process looks like?
Absolutely. This is a great question. So both the Esperanza patient and the San Francisco patient have detectable HIV antibodies, which means that their immune system has seen the virus and has produced antibodies to the virus. And those can be detected in the bloodstream, very much like we would see antibodies to SARS-CoV-2 infection or influenza, et cetera. So we know that through these tests that the immune system has seen the virus. What is not seen is the actual viral particle itself circulating in the bloodstream, or the genetic material from that virus circulating in the bloodstream. And when the scientists looked in cells, again, this is where HIV will hide. It inserts its genome and integrates into a person's DNA, into their chromosomes. When they looked at billions and billions of cells to look for evidence of that integrated HIV DNA, or that reservoir in those cells, they found very, very little. I mean, very, very, very tiny amounts, maybe 7 copies in over 1.5 billion cells. So really, really small levels. And the virus that was there was not intact. So it was not able to make a replication competent virus. It's almost like it's a fossil of a remnant viral infection from the past.
Now, the Esperanza patient is the second known person whose immune system may have eliminated all the viable viruses from their body, meaning that although it's rare, this has happened before, and you kind of mentioned there was another person. How could this research help with the fight against HIV?
Absolutely. I think one of the things that everybody's excited about in these patients is what is it about the immune system that is able to bring the virus levels so low that it's essentially cured, that there's no chance of this virus coming back and causing a problem without antiviral therapy, or even if people stop therapy. So I think that what we really, really are looking for are find out what is it in the immune system? What is it? Is it a T cell response to fight infection? Is it something else that's able to identify these infected cells in the body and essentially clear them over time? And I think that what that was, if we can find out how to manipulate, how to emulate that immune response in people that normally would not do it on their own, that this would have a profound impact on finding a cure for HIV that's scalable and also affordable for the large number, the millions and tens of millions of people living with HIV.
So I would consider these situations and several others as medical miracles, considering that HIV still has no set cure. Why is HIV and AIDS such a challenging virus to find a cure for?
Yeah, that's a great question. This is obviously, we have been working for decades to try to find cure for HIV, and it's been elusive, except for a small number of cases as the Esperanza patient. And I think part of the reason is that the nature of the virus is that it integrates and it inserts itself into a person's own genes and their cells. And those cells can proliferate, they can divide and make new cells over time and carry that genetic material with it. But not only that those cells that are infected can look like normal, healthy cells, especially if someone is taking suppressive antiretroviral therapy. Those cells can stay quiescent and the immune system or the body may not even know that there is infection in those cells. And this has made it very challenging, not only to cure HIV, but also to find vaccines to prevent infection, and other discoveries have been very challenging because of the nature of the virus itself.
Now, the Esperanza patient also gave birth to a child last year, and the baby is HIV-free. Now, this is not a rare occurrence, as many HIV-positive people have given birth to HIV-negative babies. Can you just explain how that works?
Sure. Before there was antiretroviral therapy, a significant number of babies born to mothers that were infected with HIV or living with HIV became infected as well. This is before we had AZT or before we had some of the more modern combination antiretroviral drug therapies. However, if we've learned that if we treat the mothers during pregnancy, and especially around the time of delivery, that we can dramatically reduce the transmission rate to the newborn baby. In fact, it's been years, I think, since we've seen an infected infant an infant become infected from an infected mother, simply because we can give antiretroviral therapy. We can drive those viral loads, at least the circulating virus, to very, 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 very low levels to prevent transmission. And in fact, it's very, very, very rare now to have someone become infected with HIV either in utero or after birth if the mother is on suppressive antiretroviral therapy through the duration. So it's really dramatic how it's reduced the transmission rate.
So everything going on with the Esperanza patient is an extremely rare occurrence, but the Esperanza patient remains a symbol of hope. Focusing on overall HIV awareness, what are options available to people in high-risk HIV communities, and how can they protect themselves?
Absolutely. That's a great question. I think one of the things that we like to say is that treatment is prevention. Getting on treatment and getting on treatment early is not only healthy for a person who becomes infected with HIV, but it can also dramatically reduce transmission to others. So if someone is on suppressive antiretroviral therapy and they have no detectable viral load in their blood using various commercial assays that you can get at a doctor's office or even other testing sites, that it's actually would dramatically reduce transmission of HIV. We also now have pre-exposure prophylaxis. So for those who may be at high risk of acquiring HIV, if we give a 2-drug combination therapy, that can also dramatically reduce the risk of becoming infected with HIV. So I think treating not only to prevent new infections, but also preventing new infections before they become an issue is clearly a really fantastic way to go about thinking about the HIV epidemic here in the United States and throughout the world.
Doctor, thank you so much for joining us. How can people stay up to date, just with you and educate themselves overall on HIV?
Absolutely. There's a lot of resources. The CDC and other government websites certainly have resources you can go to. You can reach out to those of us who study and treat HIV infection. You can see the email address here, or you can talk to your primary care physician, local health department, et cetera. We'll have a lot of information on prevention, treatment, and whatnot.
All right, thank you. We'll be right back with more Open BXRX Tuesday. Welcome back. In February 2020, 25-year-old Ahmaud Arbery was murdered while jogging in a Georgia neighborhood. Nearly 2 years later, the three white men who chased and killed Arbery were all found guilty of murder charges. Joining us to discuss this case and the politics of race and anti-Blackness is Christopher Bruce, Policy Director at ACLU of Georgia, and an expert on racial profiling, bias, and the criminal justice system. Christopher, thank you so much for joining me.
Happy to be here.
So Gregory McMichael, Travis McMichael, and William Roddy Bryan Jr. were all found guilty of murdering Ahmaud Arbery. In a few months, it will be nearly 2 years since Ahmaud was killed. Why do you think this took so long?
Well, let's be real about the subject. The system works the way that it was designed to work, and that is to be biased against Black people. So when they actually looked into the investigation, we saw that the police did not do their job. They saw a dead Black man on the ground, and they saw three white individuals who claimed self-defense. And you had a district attorney who literally obstructed justice, Jackie Johnson, and told them not to arrest the Bryants. And they slept in their beds for 74 days. So the reason why this didn't happen is because the system works like that. And when people are not watching, things like this happen often in America.
So it initially took 10 weeks for law enforcement to make the first arrest. At the time, Georgia had a state citizen arrest law, which allowed residents to take law enforcement into their own hands if they witnessed a crime and the police weren't around. What do you make of this? And could this be an example of state-sanctioned violence?
Oh, absolutely. And if we know anything about the history of the United States, the police departments weren't made originally. It was slave patrols used to harass people under the same guise of citizens' arrest. The history of citizens' arrest, even in the state of Georgia, harken back to civil rights days. So using this type of defense today goes along with what's been done before of terrorizing Black communities. What we need to do and what Georgia has done has been the first state to repeal citizens' arrest. But let me tell you, it's just one piece of a biased justice system against Black people.
So you kind of touched on it a little bit. Black people face a unique experience in the U.S. and often deal with the effects of implicit bias. Can you explain what implicit bias is? And do you think that's what we actually saw with the murder of Ahmaud?
It's different for different people, but basically implicit bias is when you initially, through the systematic assimilation of our country, are looking towards people in a certain way. It affects us in so many ways, including who is beautiful, what type of foods to eat, what makes you feel good or what's not, what's definitely accepted in society. And there's an implicit bias towards Black men. If I did not have on this jacket and this tie, and I just had on a hoodie and something else, I would still be an attorney. I still graduated from law school, but you wouldn't see that. You would see me as a thug or a hoodlum because that's what the media and that's what the system has put forth. What we're doing right now is making sure that we have to break down these barriers between each other so that we can all be accepted and treated as Americans instead of being hunted down like we're terrorists or somebody who's actually harming the community.
Now, I really like to know, is it still implicit bias if these subconscious thoughts are followed up with harmful and racist actions?
It is. Implicit bias is just the beginning towards an end. So if you already have these thoughts of this person is less than a human, let me treat them as less than a human. That is a problem within our society altogether. So really the thoughts and the paradigms that we have, not as a society as a whole in the nation, and especially in the area of Brunswick, where you have some of the highest disparities of wealth between white people and Black people in this nation, not just Georgia, in the nation. You see it playing out in these areas of saying, well, we're still going to believe in white supremacy. And I believe that's what you saw in this trial.
So when the news reported the guilty verdict, many people were relieved. However, I think that relief speaks to something larger. Many feared that these three men would actually get away with this. Are we right to have this fear? And what has history shown us in regards to white aggressors and Black victims?
Ahmaud Arbery was murdered on February 23rd of 2020. Trayvon Martin was murdered on February 26th of 2013. The reason why I know that is because I was just interning in law school and was sent to Sanford, Florida to really look into the Trayvon Martin murder itself. So within those 7 years, we have not changed. And in some ways, we've become worse of seeing the embodiment of Black men lying on the street, or literally murdered by the hands of someone else. These type of problems happen all across the country. The thing about it is everyone does not have a video. So we haven't seen justice really happen at this point.
And I want to look a little bit further into this case. The defense team for the murderers of the trial argued self-defense, as we both know, and attacked Ahmaud's character while doing so. The defendants also dehumanized Arbery, referencing his long, dirty toenails. Can you address what America was actually seeing in that moment of the trial?
We're looking at something that the district attorney actually did a very good job in prosecuting the case. The district attorney did not mention race not one time throughout the entire trial, except in their closing arguments, while the defense continuously brought up race. And the prosecutor did a great job of this because they knew that there was implicit bias within this county or culture. The reason why the district attorney stayed away from it is because of the implicit bias of the area, of saying this didn't happen really more towards this is a human being. Let's forget about being black or white. Let's start talking about what is humane and what is not. And it doesn't matter who was jogging down the street. It matters on who this person was. And Ahmaud Arbery was a young black man who was not bothering anyone. And the reference to the dirty toenails was by the defense to really bring up the racial issue within it of trying to dehumanize him. So the back and forth play, you see it playing out. Luckily, the prosecution won.
So there's no doubt the defense lawyer was hoping to connect to the jury. The jury was nearly all white with one black juror. And this seems to happen often in these types of trials. We just saw it with the Kyle Rittenhouse trial. Do you think this is intentional?
Oh, absolutely. Again, the system is set up to benefit or not benefit black people altogether. So it's to keep the status quo. And if you are going to keep the status quo, you have to keep up the systems within themselves. So you don't really need to change anything. We need to look further into our communities about how jurors are selected. Signing up for voting roles and everything else are ways that certain counties look into it. So if you have not looked into it, if you've never been called for actually jury duty, you need to be looking at your county and saying, why not? Like, I should step up and speak towards the standards of justice in my community.
And I guess just so we're clear, do you feel the race of the jurors matter?
Oh, absolutely. Race is always going to be an issue in America, and the race of the jurors, especially in this county, is always going to be an issue. I think, and you see this within the charges for the jury. Travis McMichael got the most amount of charges of guilty verdicts, then Greg McMichael, and then Mr. Bryant. So the jury was very deliberate when it came to the culpability of the case, of saying there are some people who pulled the trigger who would definitely get more time, while others who did not, but definitely co-conspirated in crime, are still guilty, but do not have the same level of culpability. So the jury was very deliberate within this.
So, as I mentioned previously, many were relieved to see the family of Arbery get justice. However, according to CNN, attorney for William Roddy Bryan Jr. says he plans to appeal. I think this is super important. Can you just tell us what that actually means?
Well, an appeal is basically trying to gauge the judge's decision or the jury's decision altogether about if this person's guilty or not. And they'll be looking at certain objections in the case of saying, why are we appealing this? One of the objections is, why do you have black pastors in the courtroom? Did this bias the jury altogether? And when it comes down to it, you have a constitutional right to look into trials and for fairness of a trial. So it was disgusting for them to even bring that up. For the appeal, he may be doing this because he's getting paid by other white supremacist groups who defended racists before. So he may have his own bias towards it, of really looking into money. Let's not forget, too, come February of 2022, all of them will be on hate crimes charges by the federal government as well. So that's even more time. And that will be a trial basically focused on race.
Now, prior to Ahmaud's death, Georgia was one of 4 states without a hate crimes law. I was really shocked to hear that. Can you tell me your thoughts on that?
It's Georgia, okay? And I hate to say it like that. I've lived here for so many years. I was there with the governor when he signed the hate crimes bill, especially including other issues such as LGBTQ. There's a lot of hate in this country in places. So we were grouped in with Alabama, Mississippi. The only time you want to be grouped in with that group is in football. You do not want to be grouped when it comes into civil rights or anything else. Georgia still lacks a civil rights omnibus bill to protect our rights as well. So this is just one of the many things, again, to look into the system of injustice within the state and within the nation.
And I also just want to add that they kind of got rid of the citizen's arrest law due to this death. So although it's taken some time, at least something came out of this. I want to know, looking back at this case, if it weren't for activists and social media, do you think Arbery's family would have seen justice at all for their son?
Not at all. What it really comes down to, again, he was murdered on February 23rd of 2020. And if it takes 74 days to arrest a murderer, then we have been woefully silent. We've really not even given the credence of the system that it should be. If it was not for that video being released and the absolute outcry, you may have gotten another situation where white supremacists were relieved of their duty and probably praised within their community of killing a Black man. That's happened before in the 1920s, and now we're in 2020.
Christopher, thank you so much for joining me. Lastly, can you just tell everyone where they can stay up to date with you and just learn more and educate themselves on racial injustice in America?
Sure. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Attorney C. Bruce. And also make sure that you do follow and continue this fight. Justice is not done yet. Justice is when this never happens again to another family or anything else. So yes, putting someone who harmed someone in prison is one thing. Making sure that this does not happen again is another. Let's seek for the latter.
All right. Thank you so much. We'll be right back with more Open BXRX Tuesday.
If you're struggling to afford your internet bills during the pandemic, there's a temporary government program that may be able to help. It's called the Emergency Broadband Benefit, and it provides up to $50 monthly discount on your broadband bill to qualifying households. Find more information about the program, including if you qualify and how to enroll, at fcc.gov/broadbandbenefit, or call toll-free at 833-511-0311. That's 833-511-0311.
Welcome back. We've left the Halloween season behind us, but beware of scammers. Cybercrooks may be trying to rob you of your finances and a jolly spirit this holiday season. Senior tax partner for the Commission ENT, Jeffrey Almanzar, joins us to discuss the frightening facts about the rise of holiday scams. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Kibing. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing great. So, so we're at that time of the year when scammers are at all-time high. They're all over. They're catching you on your phone. They're catching you at your bank accounts. They're emailing. They're everywhere. Pretty much, you have to watch out, with everything that you do right now. So the holiday season obviously is a time where a lot of people are shopping a lot more than any other time of the year. So there's a lot more transactions, there's a lot more numbers. So people are less likely to look through their transactions and see if there's any money coming out of their bank accounts that should not have been a withdrawal. So scammers are in tune into what's happening in the trends. So they know exactly when to attack, basically. The holiday season is a time to really take a step back, at certain points and just look through your transactions and make sure that everything is where it's supposed to be and you're shopping where you're intended to shop. Yeah.
So during my research, I found that online scams are actually the most common way to scam people these days. Why has the internet become such a playground for cyber thieves?
Well, it goes with the times, obviously now the internet is a lot bigger marketplace than it was before. And before it was credit cards, before it was people going into stores, going into banks, going into bootleg shops. Now everything's online. Now there's Cash Apps, now there's Bitcoin, now there's black markets, there's Facebook market, there's whole bunch of different, markets that people are shopping, and they're pretty much giving people access to their money, and it's a scary time. It's a time of expansion where obviously there's gonna be some good coming to it because the world is just becoming a lot smaller, with every turning, day. So, but at the same time, it comes with its pros and cons that we have to be aware of every single thing that we do online and try to protect ourselves with who we give our information to, finding ways to protecting your information, maybe with double authentications, anything that you can do to find information to secure your money and your social security numbers, and just people educating themselves. There's so much ignorance out there. I think I've seen someone post their social security number on Instagram, and I'm like, oh my God, So it's really crazy how people are getting so comfortable with social media as well that they forget that it's a public space that everyone has access to seeing your information. So that's another thing to be aware of.
So I like that you brought up social media, and even like the Facebook marketplace, because that kind of leads into my next question. Just, social media platforms provide grounds for scammers to thrive. Can you just explain the importance of avoiding places like the Facebook marketplace? And I think even Instagram has like a shopping plaza that people can shop at.
Right. So, and it's a shame that people are falling into these types of scams online, especially on a big company like Facebook. Because you would think that a company like that is monitoring what's happening in these marketplaces. But unfortunately, even I shopped, at the marketplace and received a totally fake item. And I was like, wow, how is this even allowed, for them to be allow this to happen? But, with everything that happens negatively, something positive comes. So now I'm noticing that a lot of these other websites are creating their own type of authentication. So you have companies like StockX, you have companies like Goat, you have companies like, I think even eBay now is creating their own type of authentication where they have this department that looks at the product and makes sure that what they're selling is actually not a fake, or a replica of what they're trying to buy. So that gives these companies, an upper hand because now you have that trust. So maybe in the future, maybe that's something, a point of interest for Facebook and the Facebook market. But obviously, people are gonna be attracted to cheaper items that are being sold in these marketplaces for, a lot cheaper. But you're gonna get what you paid for it. I remember back, they had something called Craigslist. I mean, I think Craigslist is still around, but maybe it's not as out in the forefront as it used to be before. But that's pretty much another type of market where Craigslist. A lot of people used to post a lot of stuff, and people used to get tons of fake items and stuff through there. Um, so yeah, those are little things that you want to look into. Those are the risks you take when you deal with people online. Hmm.
So now that we're talking about just like online in general, although it's very convenient, has the rise in digital money transfer systems like Cash App and PayPal, have those places made it easier for people to scam others?
Absolutely. So any type of transactions that create this method of interacting or exchanging currencies a lot quicker is going to create a faster, scam artist. So there's people that have Cash App and, oh, send me, $50 and I'm going to give you $5,000 back. And I'm like, wow. So I guess that's doesn't sound like a scam. So maybe I should do it, but it's like one of those things that if it sounds too good to be true, then maybe it is too good to be true. So you have to look into that. And I see this all the time. There's people, oh, you have to bring in 10 people, to bring in five. And then what happens when the last person quits? There's gonna be 20 people there without any money, and you have to be aware, of when you get into things. And a lot of these people that get into it, they obviously put their money in, so they want to try to get their money back so that they can get out. But then now you leave other people behind you that are pretty much going to get scammed. But just like this is a whole bunch of other scams online and on social media. So what I suggest is that, what we do here, we help people open up legit businesses. We help people incorporate their businesses. We help people open up websites. We help people create business accounts on social media, on Instagram, and try to get certified, because they look at these accounts a lot different. When they see that they're selling something to the public, Instagram will look into it and see that you are selling a service that is not going to scam people. And if they see that you're doing any type of foul play, they will shut your page down. So eventually these pages will get looked up by Instagram or Facebook, and then they will be shut down. But unfortunately, a lot of people have already lost their money. So that's another thing to really look into is, who you're dealing with, who you're doing business with, to make sure that you don't get scammed, and try to find references, comments, look into the reviews and Google reviews or Yelp or any of these review websites.
So the FBI found in a study from the Internet Crime Complaint Center that non-payment and non-delivery scams cost people more than $265 million. So that's a lot of money. What are the tactics, or what are some tactics that these scammers are using, and how can we quickly identify them?
Wow. So yeah, scamming is a federal crime. So a lot of these people, and unfortunately, um, a lot of people that are dealing with these types of crimes are I would say within the age range of 20 and 30. So it's relatively young, people that are getting into these type of things. And it's a federal crime. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people in jail for this, and they get caught eventually. Because if you think about the times of the mafia back in the 20s and Al Capone, all they have to do is follow the money, so they see where the money is coming, where the money is going. They scam somebody. Eventually, that person that's doing the scamming wants to get paid. So they follow the money, and eventually they find the person that did this. So the FBI they have their work cut out for them. This is something that's never going to go away. They have their own division that deals with the scammers. But for every correction, there's going to be someone else that's going to become a disruptor. So it's an ongoing cycle that's never going to end. There's always going to be a scam to any industry that opens, because people's always going to try to crack the code on something, on how to make money off it, you know. So it's something that's forever going to be in active. So we have to keep this mindset that everything is prone to be a scam. You know, unfortunately, you want to have optimistic thoughts, but everyone, even people you speak to in the street, you meet a stranger in the corner, you want to know, okay, who is this person? You know, you want to ask for references. You want to know, have you heard of this person? You know, some people call it gossip. I call it research, you know, and that's just the way life is. You want to be able to do research on what you're doing, you know, before you go ahead and give away your hard-earned money, right?
Jeff, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. And you kind of gave us some tips on what we should look out for and what we should do. How can people stay in contact with you where they can learn more about this kind of stuff?
Definitely. My Instagram page is Commission Tax. And I'm always, you know, looking forward to helping people and you know, pretty much, you know, we deal with taxes and businesses and individuals, but people, you know, they create a relationship with us and ask us questions like this and what should I do? And you know, a lot of you know, the advice that we give based on this scamming situation is the budgeting. You know, if you're keeping an eye on your transactions and you know what you're spending your money on, you can catch, you know, little things like this. I remember a couple years back, I found this $2,000 mattress was charged in my bank account, and I'm like, wow, I already have a bed. So what's happening here? And next thing you know, it was from Walmart, which is a store that I actually shop at, and lo and behold, it was somebody went into my account and they charged a bet, you know, and I have all the type of security measures. I do everything there is. So no one is safe from this. So the only thing we can do is just keep a close eye, you know, try to check it once or twice a week, go down your list, you know, and make sure that all your transactions are copacetic, you know, however, you know, you phrase that. So it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for utilizing me for this topic, and always looking forward to seeing you again and the whole BronxNet family. So thank you very much.
No, thank you. I really appreciate it. That's all for our show today. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Kit Milleen, wishing you and yours safety and wellness now